Good morning. What you see on your screen is what we're going to be doing today. We're doing the quilt with the owls in it. Hi, Jane. And so wanted to give you a little picture because with the blocks being 15 inches, they are a little hard to see on my little table here. So you're seeing the block that we're going to be working on today there on the screen. Good morning, Denise. Hi, Bobby. We've got a few people not too far away, from me at least. Hi, Jan. Welcome. All right, today, hi, Sherry. Today we're going to be working on the rows in the book. So if you have your book, either a book or the PDF file, we're on page 64 today and following those pages for this particular block and quilt. So I am going to take the owl down so you can see that, and you'll be able to see it in your pattern as well, because we're going to work on each of these rows. So let me drop down to my table, and I'll remove this. So as you can see, it's going to be a little tough to see all these. So the first thing that we're going to do is talk about the squares and doing the flip and sew and making sure that we have those on opposite sides of the block to get the ears correct. I chose to go with all the same backgrounds for the owl quilt. I played around with the different backgrounds and things, and for me, I just felt that it seemed to come out nicer with using one fabric per. So let's take a look at row 1. We're going to put the ears in first, and you have your large background square and you have your smaller one. We're going to put those in the corner, and this is where you're going to need to pay attention. And I don't think my line is quite dark enough totally for you to see on screen, but for the sake of, I have the Sew Steady mat on my machine, which I can do these without marking, but for the sake of the show today and whether or not you have something like that, you're going to mark, and you want to put the marking line starting at the top right going to the bottom left for your and this will be for the ear on the right side. All right, so let's pop over to the machine, and you're going to be oops, sorry about that. So we're going to sew right down that marked line. Oh, my machine kind of went a little wonky there at the beginning. Get that out. Not sure what happened there, but let me kind of maybe press that out a little bit. I think I'll be okay, but I think my thread got caught and I didn't notice it. It happens. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about what she suggests in the book, and that is leaving the back side intact so that you can, in case this moved at all on you, or it wasn't exactly on there, so that your blocks are the same size. So she suggests folding this back and then cutting the top part away, and then pressing it so that it flips down, and that when you sew your blocks together, because you can even see with mine a little bit, there's a little bit of discrepancy here, and I think it came from whatever happened when I started that seam. And you're to follow your white square as opposed to anything that might be hanging over, or trim it off, whichever you prefer on that. So that is the right hand side, and for the other one, you're going to do the same thing. And then when you flip this down, you're going to have your ears, this one coming in this way, and this one you want to have so that your blocks can look like this. All right, so that's the way you're going to sew them. So top right to bottom left, top left to bottom right, and press those in, and you have your owl ears. So just paying close attention to that as you're sewing. You might have to flip around a few times, but row 1. Any questions on that, please put them into the chat box, and we'll try to get to those. And then now I want to look at row 2 here, and this is where we're going to look at making the half square triangle first, and then we're going to do this flip and sew again on this second block in the second row. And there she has a method that I don't use very often in making half square triangles. I'm not 100% sure why we're using it, but I used it because it was what the pattern shared to do, and the blocks came out exactly the way they were supposed to, and so I would probably advise it too. You're going to have leftover material, and that can be used in other quilts in the book, or come up with your own. So let's look at row 2. If you have your pattern right there with you, turn the page, and we're gonna get to. So it's asking you to look at. We're making that centerpiece, so it says 2 dark fabrics and 2 light fabrics, and that's our backgrounds that will go on either side if you're seeing that quilt. So let me show you how she does her half square triangles. So putting your squares right sides together, and I'm going to mark that. And this particular ruler is not quite long enough to go the whole distance, but I have marked it with the 45-degree angle on the other side. So I think it should be okay. Let me see if I can get that line a little darker. And then I'm going to continue that on to the bottom. Okay. Now, this method for sewing a half square triangle is to sew directly on that line again. The other way that we so often do it is that we sew a 1/4 inch on either side. That's not what is happening in these directions. So we're going to go to the machine and we're going to sew directly on the line, just like we did before. Let's see if I can get this so it doesn't bunch up this time. All right, so now we have our half square, our 2 half square triangles sewn together. And now what we're going to do is we're going to cut that on one side of it 1/4 inch away from the sewn line. And like I said, this is, a little bit different method. I've used it before. Other patterns have called for it. Or you can work out the math and do it the other way, so that, you're not wasting fabric, because now you have these 2 basically triangles. And they can be used in some of the other quilts in this book, or make a wonky star. Use them as half square triangles in another quilt, whatever you prefer, but we're going to just set those aside for right now. And we're going to press this to the dark side, or darker fabric side. So press that. And now you have that 5.5 inch square, and it's really right on the money at 5.5. And so we're going to do the other one so I can show you that flip and sew and matching up those blocks in here. So again, let's mark our. And because this ruler is a little bit short, I'm using my 45-degree angle to make sure that I'm right on the point and that I'm straight down the block, so that I don't get off at the end. All right, so again, sewing right down the middle of that block. All right. That back. And again, we're trimming 1/4 inch away from the, the seam line. And you've got that other fabrics there. And again, we're going to sew or press to the darker side of this. All right, now once we've got those 2 blocks, and they would sit like, I'm going to turn it until I get it correct. There we go. All right, so now I've got, actually it's light and dark, so it's this way. And you're going to take your, that's why having your pattern right there is helpful, so that you can look at it and make sure that we're getting this correct. So the lighter brown is to the left and right, and the darker is in the middle. Before I show this next part, let me just make sure there's no other questions. Oh, Sherry, thank you. Okay. That 404, I'm glad. Sherry, thank you for sharing what you did there to get that. All right, so now we are going to put the, and again, I want to mark this before I sew, so that you can see the line and where we're sewing. Because again, we're going to do that flip and sew. And we're going to put that that block together into the corner, so that when you flip this back, it's going to look like that. Okay? So let's, and I'll go ahead and mark this one so we can do that all at the same time. And really, for me, the biggest issue with this quilt and sewing it together was the fact that, and so I just want to make sure that this is going the right way before I sew. All right, back to the sewing machine. And of course, you can put pins in it to help hold it in place. I find that, you know, the square's not so big that it's moving much on me, so I'm not using pins, but feel free to use the acorn glue for the points, because that always helps, and or a pin. And of course, the thinner the pin, the less chance you have of the fabric moving and getting out of place. So all right, so again, we're gonna press these. I'm going to pull the back side up and flip that dark piece back, so that I can trim the top little square that we sewed on away, and do that also with this one. And so now we have our two pieces. I'm going to set my seam, and then I'm going to press this to the corner, and again set my seam, pressing it to the corner, and then I want to line these two up like this. And you know, I got slightly off here a little bit as I was sewing, but now when you flip this and you sew these two together, what you know, you can go ahead and trim, you know, that small block away if you wish. I'm going to work at it from the perspective of what she talks about in the pattern, and that is lining up your two dark squares, and I'm going to drop a pin there because those are lined up, and I have a little bit of that red over, but I'm not going to worry about that. And now I want to make sure that I have these reds lined up exactly where they need to go. I, you know, tend to hold my thumb there so it doesn't move on me, and I can keep that right in place, and I double check it, you know, in there to make sure that those seams are lining up correctly, and then coming to this corner and doing exactly the same thing. Now you may want to make sure that you're pressing it opposite. I did not this time, and so I am going to make sure that I get that directly in the corner and that those two will stay together. I did not find that it caused me a great deal of lumpage or anything else when I was pressing it. And so now let's sew that side together. And again, I'm following not where, I just want to keep that down. And I sew at least a stitch over top of that seam so I can make sure that I have it correctly in there. And again, I'll do the same thing right there to make sure that I have stitched right in there. And I'm not following the outside red fabric, I'm following my black square. And let me go slowly and get right up to where the pin is and sew that across. And now when you open it, you can see that you'll have you know, your points together at all the places where the points need to come together, and press that. You're going to put, and it's actually goes this way, and you will put the background blocks on either side. So that is row number 2 and how you sew that. So let's go with row number 3, and the difference here is we're going to add the owl's beak, and she talks in the pattern about using the beak at just 2 scraps of yellow or orange leftovers that you have from something else. I had, and the size is really kind of irrelevant. She suggests 1.5 to 2 inches, and I think that's just to give you enough so that the beak shows and you can, you know, flip it. But the first thing that we have to do here with this is make our half square triangles. And on row 3, you're using 2 white squares for the outside edges of it. And let me just make sure that you understand. So this is row 3, and so you're gonna make those half square triangles the same way with the line down the center and cutting a 1/4 inch away. You're gonna make you know, your light and your dark, and the body of the owl also goes down into the whatever this color is here. The body on row 4 is the same. fabric. So you're going to make 2 half square triangles, and then we're going to put the beak in. All right. So I've already drawn the lines for the half square triangles. So I'm going to sew those together really quickly. And I know that today is a lot of watching me sew. Sorry about that, but it's the best way to show you and to reiterate what we're doing with this half square triangle, which is a little bit different, and she explains it and shows it in the pattern on page 19, the 2 methods of making half square triangles, and this is the one of them that she uses for several of the quilts in the book. So you might flip back to that while I'm sewing. Okay, having a little bit of tough time with my threads today. I wish I was more mechanical. I knew what was going on sometimes with my machine, so I could fix it. Alright, let me cut those apart very quickly. And again, sewed straight down the center where I drew the line, cutting 1/4 inch away, hanging on to those extra triangles. I will either use them in another quilt that I make or in another one that we're going to be doing in the book. And again, I got most of your suggestions on which quilts that you wanted me to make, but if any of you that might be here for the first time and watching this, if you have a choice in what you would like to see me do or make in the book, or help you through it, please let me know in the chat. Alright, so I've got my 2 squares, and they're going to go this way, and now we're going to put the owl beak in. And what you will do for the owl beak, and she also talks about that if they don't match and if they're wonky because you didn't have a perfect square or something when you sewed it together, that's okay. That's not a problem with that. So you want the beak to come this way. All right. I had this thing about having them meet. You may or may not have the same issue. So I put my block, there. And I just kind of made sure that where the inch was on either side, so that I was being a little bit crazy here instead of being wonky, like she suggested. And I put my point there. So for those of you who may be like me and wanted it, that way. And so I did the same thing on the other side. And then, so they're actually going to meet if you sew correctly. And you want your point on that seam line. You want it to cross right there. And I wanted mine to cross right here. All right. And I stuck a pin just so they would stay put. And then when we sew them on, we're going to flip them. And you're putting right sides together when you put these squares down. So if you start with a square, or if you just cut a random triangle, whichever you do, you cut the square in half, you would just randomly cut a now on this I trimmed off, oh, sorry about that. I trimmed off these little points just because they kind of bugged me when I was sewing them. She suggests you could just leave them there, but I trimmed them off a bit. Just because that's me. All right, again, we're going to press those. And now when we put those two together, we're going to match up, and you could trim that off if it would be easier, because they do still hang over. And you can either trim them off now to meet up with the edge of your square, or you can sew it without doing that. But again, you want to line up your fabrics and your seam lines. And so if you're lining up your seam lines, they're all going to match at the end. Hopefully. And this one over here, the same thing. You're matching up that seam so they're right where they're supposed to be. And I'm going to stick a pin there just to hold it in place, even though I'm actually going to be sewing down the dark side in the center. So let's do that. And my didn't mean to do that, but my thread came undone. So excuse me for a second while I try to see because I have the light on my machine turned off so it doesn't glare when I'm sewing on camera. So that little hole is very hard to see. So let me get those threads again. All right. Now let's try that again. Make sure that's and again, I'm just sewing over that seam line. And you have, and I wasn't paying attention and I got the stripes incorrect, so I may go back and change that. But again, it's kind of wonky, kind of whatever, and if that kind of stuff bothers you, I would probably either avoid using striped fabrics, or just pay close attention to that, which I did not do. And I press this seam open simply because there is a little bit more bulk in there. And now you'll have your half square triangles on either side of that. And when you're looking at your quilt, that the beak is in the inside. You have your half square triangles on either side. And then on this last row, I just did the beak, and the feet are the same way, except they're turned the opposite direction. The feet are on the bottom instead of at the top. But you have your half square triangles made the same way. You put your beak in the same way for row number 4. So let me see if there's any questions. And Kyla, I do prefer to cut oversized and trim to perfection. I understand that. I often do that myself, and you are free to do that, but it needs to come out to be the right size that is called for. A prairie point might be cute for the beak. I think I agree with that. And what a great idea. I kind of like that even better, because then it's even more 3D. Not cutting away the base square is a way to keep accuracy. Yes, it is. That is exactly the reason for it. If you're following the square underneath, which is the right size, you're going to get that accuracy where if you cut away, both the top piece and the bottom piece, you may or may not have that. All right. Hopefully you have figured out that 404 error in the book. And the owls are really a lot of fun. It was a little bit fussy for the first block. It took a little bit of time to think through and to understand the pattern as I went. But the second and after that, it went together really quickly, and it's a lot of fun, and the owls are kind of cute. So enjoyed choosing the fabrics for it, and she was challenged by a friend to use browns, and I think that's a good choice for an owl. And I just added fun fabrics besides what I had in the bundle that we got for, if you purchased the bundle, you had a lot of great fabrics in there to choose from, and then add from your own stash, those browns and other fun yellows and stuff. So next time I'm gonna do the I gotta look at it, see what it's called. Color Brick Road. That was another one that was chosen by several of you in the book. So let me go down to my book, and it's this one right here. Color Brick Road. We'll see how to put that together, and we're going to talk a little bit more about color theory with that, and choosing and putting those fabrics together, and how you might add from your stash to the colorways that we had in the bundle that you may or may not have purchased with that. So have a great week and enjoy making those owls. And I just want to and Sherry, thank you for sharing that, because it's a great idea. She took her PDF to the FedEx and they printed it for me with a spiral binding, and I think that's great. What a great way to to keep that all together and not lose parts and pieces and mix up the pages. So great idea. And I want to do every single quilt. That's how I felt the first time I saw the whole book. I thought every single one of these quilts are fun, and I think they would, and all the color was just great. So I don't know that we'll make all of them. I don't think we'll have the time to do that, but I'm going to make the ones that you have suggested to me for sure, and I'll probably throw maybe one in that I really like, and we'll go from there. But next week it's Color Brick Road. And we'll see you next time. Blessings to all of you as you work on your project and do all the other things that life brings.